Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the final chicane with me, Kristen Boylan. So, obviously, we're in a new location today. I'm on my holiday, so we had to make do with what sort of I could do. But to be honest, I'm a little awkward doing the podcast like out here where people can hear me. I might have to like raise the volume of this when I post it. But yeah, everything will be back to normal next week. You may be glad to know. So let's talk about the Belgian Grand Prix weekend and let's start with the final chicane brain game. So the brain game today is connections. I'm going to give you a group of drivers and you have to find out the thing that like connects them all. So your group is Fernando Alonso, Giancarlo Fisichella, Jarno Trulli, Jenson Button, and Roman Grosjean. I wonder how many names out of that list that I butchered. Giancarlo Fisichella. Fisichella. Jarno. Is it Jarno or Jarno? Jarno Trulli. Jarno Trulli. I don't know. I tried my best to pronounce them right though this time. So there is a connection between those drivers, and all you have to do is find them, or at least find the one that I'm thinking of, the F1 related connection. So that's your game for the week. That's your little brain teaser. Since we last spoke, which I believe was Silverstone, some news came out obviously about Christian Horner that I think, even though some people were expecting it, probably still rocked the F1 community. I don't know if I was expecting it or not. I think I wasn't expecting it, but I wasn't surprised also. And in my last episode, I literally talked about how I thought that was going to happen and the reasons behind if that did happen, why I thought that it would happen. My opinion on the Christian Horner situation and the rumors that were about that for quite a while were always my first point of address is that I don't think it's really anything to do with what happened with Christian Horner last year and the harassment allegations. I think that if it was something to do with that, and if the Red Bull team were truly bothered by that, something would have been done about that last year. I just don't think that the timing for it now has anything to do with that. But I think Red Bull are happy enough, or not, some management in Red Bull and some higher ups in Red Bull are happy for people to think maybe that's a reason about it. I think overall it comes down to a power struggle. And in that, I think last year when the allegations were happening with Christian Horner and all of that drama that was going on, a lot came out about like the potential power struggle within Red Bull between, Helmut and Christian and some of the other shareholders, and then Joss and Max, and if they were completely happy with Christian. And I don't think that at the time was anything to do with the controversy either with Christian. I think that this was just that happening was a time that brought all of that sort of stuff up. I think Joss hasn't been happy with Christian for quite a while. And eventually they just decided to let him go. Max, I do believe that Max and Christian would have had something to do with it, and I don't think it's coincidence that the Max to Mercedes rumors happened and then Christian left. I think it was very much maybe Joss or Max saying a whole sort of it's either I stay or Christian stays. And I said this in my last episode. And obviously, Red Bull can't risk losing Max. Do I think Max would have left? I'm not sure. I think more than likely, in my opinion, that would have been more of a bluff to try and get Christian gone if they weren't happy there, if Joss wasn't happy there with that. I don't think Christian leaving has anything to do with the development of the car. I don't think like him getting fired has anything to do with that, which may be like a hot opinion, like, you know, hot take. But I don't think it's anything to do with that. I think it's just inner struggles within Red Bull. One interesting thing actually was that Red Bull were saying, or someone within Red Bull was saying that one direction they didn't like that Red Bull was taking was that the junior Red Bull team, Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, was seen as the fun team, and that Red Bull was not. And Red Bull was seen as like a strict team where you just have to drive and not do anything else. And apparently they weren't happy with that and they wanted Red Bull to be seen as the fun team that it was seen as before with, well, I'm guessing with Max and Daniel because that's when Red Bull started to become the fun team. And that's not just me trying to bring Daniel into everything, although it might be. My brain just does that sometimes. But on the topic of bringing Daniel into anything and everything, that does make me wonder if Red Bull weren't happy with, or like other people in Red Bull weren't happy with Christian Horner's decision to remove Daniel, to fire Daniel from the whole thing. I know he wanted to keep Daniel on as an ambassador, but he knew Daniel in a million years was not gonna leave F1 and become an ambassador straight away for Red Bull, the team that fired him. So I don't know. I would like to know more about all of this. I don't know if we ever will, but yeah, Christian Horner's first race weekend since Red Bull, that he's not Red Bull's boss, basically. And it actually went quite well. It actually went quite well for Red Bull, and I'd say I don't know if Christian has this attachment where he wants to see Red Bull do well, but if I got fired from somewhere, I would probably be hoping like to watch them crumble, to be honest. Maybe I'm just a bad person. But yeah, I'm sure, well, I don't know if it was the weekend that Christian would have hoped for after he left. So with Christian Horner leaving, Laurent Mekies replaces him as team principal of Red Bull, and replacing Laurent Mekies is Alan Permane. Permane, I think that's his name. So he's now the team principal of Visa Cash App or B. Just give you a bit of an insight on Alan Permane's career. Just a quick one. 1989, he joins Benetton F1 team as a test electronics engineer. 1996, promoted to race engineer at Benetton. 2002, remains with the team as it becomes the Renault Formula One team. 2005 to 2006, race engineer during Renault's back-to-back championship wins with Fernando Alonso. Obviously, a successful time for Renault. 2007, promoted to chief race engineer. 2011 to 2015, he stays with the team as it becomes Lotus F1 after Renault's exit. 2012, he's promoted to trackside operations director at Lotus. 2016, Renault returns and Permane becomes a sporting director for the Renault Works team. 2021, he continues as sporting director after rebranding to Alpine F1 team. July 2023, he leaves Alpine after 34 years. Post Belgian Grand Prix shake-up 2024 January, he joins Visa Cash App or B as racing director, and July 2025 he's promoted to team principal of Racing Bulls. What a like career line to have. He's been through it. He's been in a lot. So I haven't seen any issues right now with him. He's had 1 week at the job, but I'm excited to see what he can do and what direction he takes Visa Cash App or be in next. If it's going to be similar to Laurent Mekies and everyone before, or if it's going to be a completely different sort of shake-up of things. I think they were the main media moments. I'm not sure if anyone else can. I'm not sure if I've missed anything. Let me know. The little break was relatively calm, but it wasn't our official summer break. Our official summer break is still to come in in August. So next, I'm guessing we have a break after next race week. I actually haven't looked at the calendar in a bit, but after Hungary, do we have a break or are we into Zandvoort? I think we have a break. Guys, I think I'm getting my first like Formula One PR, but I might not also because I don't know if it was real or not. Well, it's not like that big. Well, I'm excited because I like getting free stuff, but if it's related to Formula One, like even more so. But Monster reached out and asked if they could send like Lando's, Monster sort of stuff. So I think it's Monster because it was email, and I'm always a little more suspicious when it's email because like if a verified account is texting you, like that's a bit easier to know. But I'll keep you updated on if that Monster thing does arrive because that'll be fun. I've never had Monster before in my life. I did look for it a few times in shops, but I could never find it around where I live. So hopefully I get to try the Lando Norris Monster and then I can let you know how it is. Has anyone else tried it? Is it hard to get or am I just like an idiot who goes in at all of the wrong times? I don't know. Okay, on to the race weekend. FP1 saw some early issues for Stroll and Carlos. Carlos's whole car was actually being taken apart, and I think that was a sign that the weekend wasn't going to go too great for him, and it didn't end up as well as he or I hoped. Williams were sort of dealing with a cooling issue, I think, and what they were doing to solve that cooling issue was actually losing them tenths, but they needed to do it, or else the cooling issue wouldn't be resolved, so they're going to have to work on that and figure out how to not do that. It's the one thing I would never be able to do as an F1 engineer because I don't know how any of that sort of stuff works. I can tell you about it, but I can't really explain it further than that. Maybe they could put a fan in the car. We have a fan in our room, and they could just, yeah, they just put a nice fan in the car. A battery fan, so you wouldn't have to plug it in anywhere. That might work. That was our only free practice of the weekend, which obviously isn't great for the cars that didn't really get a lot of running time because then it was a sprint weekend and we went straight into sprint quali. I always hate being away for sprint qualies because like there's a lot going on and it's harder to keep up with everything. But sprint quali Q1, Kimi had an early off. Kimi, not a great weekend, and he was very upset as well, which was so sad. Did you see the interview of him crying? He was so upset, and you forget how hard this must be for rookies, like with the pressure that it is to be Formula One driver. And I know that pressure is necessary because, like, you can get replaced in mere seconds, but to be that young and to be doing exams and then be going straight to an F1 race weekend and having that pressure, because you're more sensitive to that when you're younger. I feel like letting people down and feeling that, and him feeling that on his whole team, of letting them down. So that interview was very sad, and I feel like you just need to remember the younger drivers probably do need a bit more support. I hope the team give them that support and that like training to, just rebuild and not worry about it as much, I guess. I feel like I'd be very much a Kimmy sort of situation if I was a Formula One driver. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just feel bad that he was upset. Top three were confident enough to not come out for final lap, so that was Piastri, Verstappen, and Norris. Lewis did seem to be hopeful coming into this weekend and after the last race weekend, but unfortunately it didn't really start out that way because he went off at the bus stop chicane and he was out. His first sector wasn't great anyway, but he was out anyway. The off was enough. And that caused a momentary yellow flag, which I think all the drivers actually successfully dealt with. Ollie Behrman's was close, but he did a good job. Like he kept up the speed where he could and just about like pulled off as much as he could and he ended up getting through. So we saw out Antonelli, P20, Colapinto, Hamilton, Hulk and Albon. It just definitely not the weekend Albon would have wanted, at least at the start anyway. Q2, we saw the lap time starting to be deleted. Very minimal, like track limits, but track limits are track limits. And Piastri was one of the first victims to that. He got his first lap time deleted, but luckily it was his first, so he could go again. It is hard to see. I honestly thought that there's no way he's over. But then, the FIA have different camera views or whatever, and then they showed us one of the camera views and it was very clearly he was over. It's weird how different it is from different camera views. I also want to apologize just in case it's a little loud right now. There's obviously always a lot of noises going on around here, garden work and stuff like that, and dogs barking. So, and now I'm adding to that noise with my talking about Formula One at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning. So things didn't end up great then for Mercedes because Russell was also out. Piastri was actually really close to being out, but he did luckily get through. Not a very successful Q2 session for him though. So P15, we had Stroll, we had Alonso out, Russell out, Tsunoda out, and Lawson out. Not where Tsunoda wants to be, obviously. Q3, Piastri was actually pulling a great second sector in Q3. Lando also had a good lap, but sprint quali definitely wasn't his main quali. But Yolanda didn't seem to pull out the stops for sprint quali. He was apparently saving that for the actual main Grand Prix quali. So although he did have a good lap, Max took provisional pole and Piastri takes pole then from Max with a very good lap. Ocon also, I think Ocon ended the session with the fastest sector one, did he? He got it at some point anyway. And that all while giving Behrman a toe. So very impressive from Ocon. He finished P5 in the Haas in the end. So The sprint quali saw Piastri take pole, Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc, Ocon, Sainz, Berman all the way up there, very impressive, Gasly as well, Hadjar and Bortoleto. The Visa Cash apps were close this weekend, but Hadjar just did get the one up at the start during the sprint sort of side of things. Then the sprint was a little bit of a mess. I feel like what was I doing for the sprint? I was watching the sprint, I know, but I feel like there was something messy about it. Oh yeah, I was out the night before actually. That's my own fault. I was like, I must have been away. No, I was at home all day. But yeah, the sprint, Gasly didn't start the sprint with the rest of the grid due to suspected water leak, but he did start the sprint eventually, just a few laps behind, obviously not trying to do anything, just trying to find out what was wrong with the car and see if whatever they did fixed it basically, which is quite important as well, especially considering the qualifying hasn't even happened yet for the Grand Prix, and then you have the Grand Prix. So sprint also is like a second chance. Some people say it ruins the Grand Prix, but on the other hand, it's also a chance to get things sorted and lose out on points in the sprint and then be better prepared for the Grand Prix. So it has its benefits. Max had a very nice overtake at the very start, an easy overtake on the outside. And both McLarens actually with the poor start. And I was like, oh, their car just isn't up to it. But actually, I think Leclerc and Verstappen just got the better of both of them at the start. It was around lap four that Gasly did eventually get out. Norris did get Leclerc again, and Oscar was still gaining on Max, but not quite enough. Still until like lap eight, Oscar was like still holding on to Max at this point, which if you think back to last year or 2 years ago, that didn't seem like a possibility. So we have Red Bull dropped sometimes. Lando did catch up with Oscar, but Oscar was gaining still more on Max. So there was a bit of a train going on there, and Lando wouldn't have really been able to overtake Oscar, and obviously team orders wouldn't have made sense anyway. So you could definitely tell that the sprint race, no risky moves are being made. Everyone needed to sort of stay in one piece for quali. So we didn't get to see the full potential of some of the cars, or maybe full potential of the cars, but not full potential of the drivers more because people were just acting a bit safer. And yeah, most of the grid finished where they started. Ocon with his P5 finish, which was very impressive, and Carlos as well with the P6 finish, which was again very impressive. Remember, he's in Williams. So good job from Carlos there. Then we'll move on to qualifying for the actual Grand Prix. Quite an early investigation for Hulk and Stroll with an unsafe release, but nothing came out of that. There was a challenging weekend actually for Aston Martin. Both of the Aston Martins were out and they didn't really seem surprised at that. Both drivers were very unhappy with their cars this weekend, and you could really see the frustration from Stroll and Alonso. It must be hard, to be fair, week after week. But they were both sort of in the same boat with this, so it is the car this weekend. Permane and Hadjar actually had a great first session as well, but we had out P20, Stroll, and then Alonso. So Alonso once again bet Stroll in qualifying, but literally just by one place, and that being P19 and P20. Antonelli, again, a poor result from him, adding on to the already poor weekend that he was having. Colapinto, not where he would want to be as well, especially since Gasly did so well earlier on. And Bortoleto then out, but that Bortoleto being out changed to Lewis because Lewis got his lap deleted for track limits. So he's out in P16 and Bortoleto was pushed through. Q2, actually, one thing I will say is that Lawson and Hadjar seem to be really on par with each other this weekend as well. I don't know what switched, but Lawson has just been doing so much better recently. Like he's just seems so much more confident with the car and so much more comfortable. And that's what, like, it just takes you just figure out one thing with the car and the amount that you can gain from that. That's why it's just so hard to judge drivers quickly. Like Lawson could have found that with the Red Bull earlier, but again, Red Bull weren't sure of that, and they obviously thought maybe Yuki could be doing better. So hindsight is great because obviously Yuki is not doing great in the Red Bull, even though he was doing incredible in the Visa Catch-Up or B, and it's just hard to know. I would not know like what is Lauren Mackey's gonna do because he knows Yuki's potential and he's seen Yuki's potential firsthand for quite a while when he took over from France. So I don't know. I don't know what Red Bull are gonna do because there's a much point keeping Yuki in the junior team if he's never gonna progress. But can anyone even progress to the Red Bull team? because no one seems to be able to drive that car. It's a conversation that we have every week that I'm still no closer to coming up with a solution for, but luckily it's not my job. Out in Q2, we had Signs with his high, I guess, coming down from the good result in sprint. Hulk was out, Ghazi out, Berman again, who had a really good session earlier on. He was out, Ocon out, but a better session for all the Red Bull drivers, for Sonoda, Lawson, Hadjar, and well, Max had a good session. Anyway, Yuki was causing a bit of trouble. I think some people thought that he was impeding, but nothing came of that either. And then Q3, Norris takes pole. Really, really great lap. Norris was definitely on at that qualifying session, and yeah, you couldn't really fault that pole position. Piastri right behind him in P2, and Charles Leclerc in P3. Definitely nice to see Charles back up there. Verstappen P4, Albon P5. Don't know where that came from, but him and Carlos sort of just swapped. And it was Albon's turn to do well, which actually happens surprisingly frequently. They sort of just switch around on who does good. Russell P6 compared to Antonelli's Q1 exit. Obviously, I'm really not sure what has been happening to Antonelli. It might just be the track. But the last few weekends, he has seemed to lose his confidence a bit, which I wouldn't say is worrying yet. I think he just needs another good weekend to get his hopes back up and his confidence back up. We had Sonoda then, Sonoda's best finish in qualifying for Red Bull. Hadjar. Also, is that Sonoda's first time qualifying above both Visa Cash Corpis? I might have made that up actually, but probably. Right behind Sonoda, we had Hadjar, we had Lawson, and then we had Borletto, who thought he was out in Q1, remember, but he wasn't. So quite an impressive finish for him to actually get into Q3 in the end. Race, we had 4 pit lane starts for changes made under park for make conditions. We had Lewis, Kimi, Alonso and Carlos, not that big of a deal. Alonso was starting P19 anyway, Lewis as well out in Q1, Kimi out in Q1 and Carlos out in Q1. So no biggie there. And Sainz out in Q2, sorry. My luck can literally be unmatched sometimes because this, and I don't know if you remember last year, we also had a boat day scheduled for the day of the Grand Prix. And this is worse because I think Daniel was in it at this point last year. Yeah, he was. Yes, obviously. We had our boat day scheduled. So I was like, well, last year when it happened, our boat day ended up being cancelled because it was windy and we moved it to a different day. So I ended up getting to watch the Grand Prix. It could have been last year, it could have been 2 years ago. I can't remember. I think it was last year. But this year I'd made peace with the fact that I wasn't going to be able to watch the Grand Prix, and I wasn't bothered because I was going to be on a boat, you know. But then, and I was on the boat from like 1 to 4, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, I think, Spanish time anyway. And the race actually got delayed right until I was off the boat. So I didn't actually miss a single thing, which is so funny. Like it just happens like that all the time. I can be lucky like that sometimes. But I'm sure that was a very annoying delayed start for everyone who was actually watching, especially anyone who had an early start with the race, like whatever, wherever you were from. But maybe they just did that for me, so I apologize. We had a rolling start after 4 laps under the safety car. Oscar had a great early overtake actually on Lando, clean and fast, a nice overtake. Lando did seem to be having some problems at the start. He had low battery pack sort of basically problems, which explains how easy Oscar's overtake on him was. There was a bit of talk that Oscar was also dealing with some problems, but I think it's definitely confirmed Lando was. I'm not sure if Oscar was. Lewis was the first one to box. He boxed lap 12 and he put the medium tyres on. He was the first one on to slicks, and it paid off, his early pit stop, because remember he started from the pit lane, so he was at the back of the grid. He had nothing to lose at this point, but 1 lap later the other started to box, so Leclerc and Piastri boxed. DRS enabled. Mediums for Piastri, Max also boxing that lap, and Mark McLaren obviously not wanting to go with the double stack, then boxed Norris. He was boxed onto hards and 6 seconds behind Piastri. He had a slow stop though, he had a slow front left, I think, in the pits, and then he's also put onto the different strategy to Norris, the one that I would have thought would be best. I think I would have wanted to be on Lando's strategy, but it did end up working out for Piastri. A lot of people were complaining about that, like if McLaren knew like Piastri could get to the end, why wouldn't they put Lando on the faster tires? But I think that's just part of it. Like you don't know. They didn't know. They were doing a risk because at least one of the drivers would pay off if Oscar's tires went and he needed at least Lando's strategy worked, and if Oscar's tires could go to the end, then I guess it's not, like, no harm being on different tires. So I don't really find a fault in the strategy there. I think that McLaren just went for something and it worked for Lando, but it didn't work because Piastri made the mediums work, as did most of the grid. So yeah, it's a hard one. Lando's speed was great though. He was the only one on hards, and obviously because he was on hards, he had a bit more room to play with the tires, and he didn't have to protect them as much. So for that reason, he could push harder, and his speed was faster. But he was also just doing great laps as well. So he was catching on Piastri fast, who was obviously protecting his tires, so he could actually try to make it to the end of the race. Hadjar went for the second stop. He pitted onto hards and he didn't have a great race from then. So a two stop did not seem like the good idea, and not many people did the two stop, to be fair. I don't know. Lando made a few mistakes. His laps weren't the cleanest. His driving wasn't the cleanest. He went off a few times. Just not the neatest of laps. But I still, even without those mistakes, I think that just the way that the strategies were, that he wouldn't have won the race in the end. Anyway, like if he was pitted before, like not to do with the strategy, if he was pitted before, who knows? But without just the mistakes that he was making going around the actual track, I think that wasn't anything that affected his result. I think what was important for Oscar being on the slower tires by the end, when the tires were worn, was that he needed to keep it perfect, and he basically did that. Lando now only minimal mistakes, not big mistakes to write home about. So a good weekend from Lando as well. And to be on the hards and to keep up that pace was very impressive from Lando. Track limits were a bit extreme. Lap 28 Sainz had his final like warning for track limits, but unless I'm mistaken, he didn't get a penalty. So I'm guessing he just kept it clean after that. I'd be so bad at track limits. That's one thing that I wouldn't be able to do, keeping the track limits. That's not the one thing I wouldn't be able to do. That's one of the million things I wouldn't be able to do. Lewis, obviously at this point having a good race. I think he was P7 by this point, and he just couldn't he get further into the points, which I'm sure disappointed him. But to be P7 at this point was so impressive and a very Lewis Hamilton-esque place to be after starting in the pits. So I would hope he came from the weekend positive about that. He just couldn't catch on to Albon. Albon was rapid in the Williams though this weekend, and the drivers were just waiting in this race for people to make mistakes and people to go off, but they just kept it clean, I guess. Bit frustrating. Obviously, the race was delayed. The race was delayed, by the way, due to rain, if I haven't said that. If you try some other strategies, I think most people were hoping for a safety car so they could change tires, but that never came. Alonso did put on mediums, lap 30, his second pair of mediums, and Antonelli also pitted. At this point, Oscar definitely decided, right, they've decided to start the loud machines. So hopefully you can hear me over them. Guys, this Sunday when I'm making the episode, we'll be back to normal. Don't worry. But yeah, we found out Oscar was happy to go to the end at this point. Norris was just 7 seconds away around lap 34, which was quite intense. And droplets of rain were starting to happen. A few more laps could have Lando got Piastri with none of them boxing. Potentially, yes. Probably. Yes, he could have, I'd say. But that's not how Formula One works. There's a certain number of laps for a reason. 2 laps left, actually. There was like 3 seconds between them, but then Lando had that lockup, which again is like one of the mistakes that I was talking about earlier. And he lost quite a bit of time. Antonelli was getting fastest laps on his mediums around lap 44. I know was he the last person to box? I'd say he was one of the last people to box. But I think like those moments are also important. Like even if you're not going to be getting the points or whatever, for him to get out there and just drive, just drive and just drive fast. It's like the little things that he needs to start building his confidence again, I'd say, as someone who's never sat in a Formula One car before. So hopefully Antonelli will be back stronger in Hungary. Lawson also a great job. He had a great job holding on to P8. obviously finished a lot higher than Hadjar. Hadjar finished at the bottom of the field, P20, and Lawson P8 would definitely be a confidence boost for Lawson. So hopefully he'll also bring that to Hungary. And he has just been improving race after race. So I think things may be looking good for him. I hope things will be looking good for him for the rest of the season. And yeah, he had a tough job holding on to P8, but he did it and he did it quite well. And Sonoda, not so much. Sonoda got actually overtaken on the last lap by Hull. So he was down to P13, Hulk in P12. So although Yuki did qualify in Q3, he did make it into Q3. Sorry. That did not actually return into the race results. So a bit unfortunate for Yuki, but he also wasn't on the best strategy. And Lauren Meckies, which Christian Horner didn't really do too often, did basically take blame for their part in Yuki's result, which I do like to see because it's not always a driver's fault. And the last thing Yuki needs is more hate and hate over things that he actually couldn't control. So yeah, I just hope Yuki has like a perfect strategy weekend where he can really show his potential and prove, his place on the Formula One grid. My personal opinion on Yuki is though that he deserves to stay in Formula One, but he just needs to move away from Red Bull and the Red Bull family and just see where he works elsewhere because I would be devastated to lose Yuki just because he can't drive the Red Bull as fast as Max can. Right, that was the race. I just screenshotted the qualifying head-to-heads of 2025. Do you want to discuss these? Because I actually didn't realize a lot of these. Alonso 13 to stroke. Alonso 13 to Stroll's 0. So Alonso has bet Stroll in every Grand Prix qualifying session this year. That one actually surprised me. I don't know how I didn't realize that because they have been so close, but the fact that Alonso has just got ahead of him, I don't know how to feel about that because Alonso's also a world champion, one of the best drivers. So it is hard to know. But also like never beating your teammate in a qualifying session, like your teammate is your biggest competition because you're in the same car. So that is also not going to really work out too well in Stroll's favor. I don't know. I just don't know what to make of Stroll. He's a good driver, but he's just not sort of going anywhere. He's sort of not moving, and he has been in the same car, and Aston Martin haven't really been going anywhere either. So it's really hard to know. It's really hard to know. He has had some great moments. Even this season, he's had some really great moments, but I'm just I don't really know what his next step is. Russell 12 to Antonelli's 1. Obviously, it's like when you look at it like this, it's so strange because you look at Antonelli's weekend and be so impressed with how he's doing, but he's also never bet Russell in qualifying. But it's Antonelli's first year. It's obviously not Russell's first year. This one I'm not concerned about. The fact Antonelli has bet him once though, I'm not concerned about that one at all, to be honest. I think that shows a good part on Russell because Antonelli is very talented, and I'm sure that's where Russell would want to be right now. Verstappen 11 to Sonoda's 0. Obviously, Sonoda Yuki hasn't bet Max in any of the qualifying sessions yet. Again, Max is a four-time world champion. Hard one to make. Not that hard to make actually. I don't think anyone would be expecting Yuki to beat Max in a qualifying session. Would love if Yuki did, but I think the thing there is that the gaps are a lot bigger. That it's not just like P1 and P2, it's like P3 and P16. So obviously Yuki's year hasn't been what he needs it to be yet, hasn't been anything near what he needs it to be yet. Leclerc 9, Hamilton 4. That's one I'm not concerned about either. Obviously, Leclerc does have that edge on Hamilton. Charles has been with the team longer. He knows the car better. Hamilton has had his issues and he's had some unluck, and a lot of it is unluck. I say that all the time, bad luck. And a lot of it is actually his fault, though, too. Just mistakes he's made and like the track limits mistake getting his time deleted. So again, it's not one I'm worried about, 9 to 4, but one that Hamilton would want to be getting better at as one of the best Formula One drivers of all time. The last thing he needs is to not be beating his own teammate in a head-to-head qualifying. Had your 9 to Lawson's 2. Honestly, I feel like I'm just going to be saying the same thing, but I'm not concerned about any of these. Hadjar has been better than Lawson. Hadjar has been the best rookie on the grid, in my opinion. Well, close I don't know. All the rookies have been sort of good, to be honest. But yeah, I would give my personal opinion right now to Hadjar being the best. But Lawson having two, especially with how poor like Lawson's time started and the confidence drop he would have got after being dropped by Red Bull. I wouldn't be worried about that right now. I think we have to just wait and see how Lawson does for the rest of the season. Piastri 7 to Norris 6. I'm getting this off of Formula Racers underscore on Twitter. Actually, that's where my screenshot is from. I feel like I probably should say that, so I'm not just stealing someone else's hard work. Again, nothing really to say about that. Piastri has just been cleaner. It's not that he's been faster than Lando, in my opinion. It's just that he's been cleaner, and that's why he's been getting. Well, that's why he's won ahead, I guess, on the qualifying things. But that's exactly where you'd want to be. You'd want your team to be on a teammate basis. Albon 8 to Sainz's 5. I don't think that's bad on Sainz at all. Obviously, Albon does have more experience with the car, but very good in Albon actually as well because Sainz does have just more experience overall. I think maybe looking at these next year when these drivers have had like their year already getting used to the car would be probably more beneficial. Ocon 7 to Behrman 6. I would say on anything that is very impressive from Behrman to be that close to Ocon, and they have both been really, really great this season. And I can't fault Ocon too much. He has made his mistakes at some points, but altogether he's had some good qualifying sessions this year. Borletto 7 to Hulk's 6. Obviously, that would be the one that I'd be concerned for Hulk. He should be beating Borletto, and it's very impressive of Borletto to be beating Hulk in the head-to-heads. Obviously, it's very close, 7 to 6, but yeah, it's still something Hulk would rather be on top of than not. And Gazzy 6 to Colapinto's 1. Colapinto, again, like a lot of these drivers haven't even been driving this car for the whole season. A lot of these drivers, two of these drivers, um, Lawson in the Visa Cash App or B Yuki in the Red Bull, and then three Colapinto who replaced Jack Doohan. I don't really know if I have much to say on that one. I think Colapinto just needs to prove himself more. He definitely needs to prove himself a lot more to retain his seat for next year, and that's really it, I think. He has bet Gasly once though, so that's something. Right, what are your opinions on that? Do you want to go back to the final chicane brain game? Yes. Let me tell you the answer. So the connection between them all was is that they all raced for Renault, basically for the Enstone based team in some sort of form. So Benetton, Renault, Lotus, Alpine. So we had Alonso, who was the Renault champion. We had Giancarlo Fisichella, who drove for Renault. We had Trulli, who drove for the early 2000s Renault. And then we had Button, who was Benetton, Renault, early career, and Grosjean, who was the Lotus, Renault era. So did you get that? If you did, well done, because that's the Flemish Cane Brain game of this week, and you won. Hungary is next week. We'll be back in familiar setting next week, hopefully. Well, I wouldn't mind staying here longer, but I hope the audio was okay for this episode. And for updates until the next podcast episode, you can go onto my TikTok, my Instagram, whatever. I'll list it below, but until then, I will see you next week.